All right, so let's talk about the Wisconsin Supreme Court and how I cannot wait for August, where we will not have a conservative majority, because this is a head scratcher. Anyway, so the Wisconsin Supreme Court's conservative majority denied a request by the Wisconsin State Bar for the court to create a new diversity, equity, inclusion, and access credit under the state's continuing legal education program. The proposal would allow lawyers licensed in Wisconsin to fulfill their 30 hours of required continuing legal education by taking a class addressing diversity and inclusion in the legal system of all persons regardless of age, race, ethnicity, religion, national origin, gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, or disabilities, and topics designed to educate attorneys on the recognition and reduction of bias. Most normal people would think that's a good thing. But with just weeks remaining as the majority voting bloc on the court, the body's four conservatives refused to hold a hearing on the bar's petition to add the course. In a concurrence to the majority's decision not to approve the credit, which quoted conservative commentators and organizations such as Ben Shapiro, who we all know is just a legal mastermind, and the Heritage Institute. Justice Rebecca Grassel Bradley wrote that the DEIA courses damage human dignity, undermine equality, and violate the law. How? Damage human dignity? I assume that means it makes me as a white person sad because I'm a big old meanie. Okay. Now, obviously, there are biases in the justice system. Now, that is not saying that all white people are bad. And if you read it as all white people are bad, then either you are way too what's the word? Sensitive, or you're one of those white people who, is perfectly fine with keeping yourself at the top of the food chain because white people are somehow superior. In which case, then you probably deserve to feel bad because, actually, no, you wouldn't feel bad because you would feel that that's the way it should be. So you wouldn't feel bad then either. So I do not see what human dignity is being damaged. Okay, we figure out that racists are racist. Nobody needs a fucking class to know racist exists. They just need to know just how entrenched racism is, but they know racism exists. Undermine equality. How? By telling people that you shouldn't get away with everything just because you're white, male, and rich? I don't understand whose equality is being undermined here. Just because certain people can't get away with shit and that the law applies equally to everyone, I don't see how that's undermining equality. I really don't. And violate the law. How does it violate the law? The decision comes as Republicans in Wisconsin and across the country have grown increasingly vocal about their opposition to diversity initiatives, especially in the wake of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision late last month to end affirmative action programs in higher education. In Wisconsin, Republican lawmakers have repeatedly passed measures limiting DEI programs in state government and state's education system. Yeah, they've been trying to remove that from the budget for the education system. We won't fund you unless you get rid of these initiatives. So, DEI courses damage human dignity, undermine equality, and violate the law, Bradley wrote. Collectively, the buzzwords diversity, equity, inclusion, and access represent a smokescreen for a divisive political agenda that perniciously reduces people to racial categories and strips them of their unique individuality. No, it fucking doesn't. Think about this for a moment. Nobody is saying diversity is just about race. The fact that I just went through all these categories that it includes and only one dealt with race tells me that this is a bad faith argument because, yes, race can be one of the categories. And it's not saying that you're getting into that you're all these qualities because you're black. It just says that this may increase this and this happening to you. So that's one thing. Plus, like I said, diversity does not equal race. It can be sexual orientation, it can be gender identity, it can be so many things. So the fact that it can be religion. So the fact that she is concentrating on race is a huge tell that she's racist and she feels that that she needs to not be reminded that she's racist because she just can't handle being told that, even though she is. So she just doesn't want to hear about it. In her concurrence, Bradley says a Minnesota State bar course on avoiding microaggressions is instead a class on how to be so boring no one can possibly take offense. No. She complains of riots in which much of Kenosha was razed during the summer of 2020. Here it comes. And states that requiring DEIA courses would create a goose-stepping brigade of attorneys. Wow. So we went from either you're boring or you're offensive to Nazism. Wow. Oh my God, what a leap. She also denies there is any evidence of bias or racism in Wisconsin's justice system, despite data showing black residents are more likely to be incarcerated in Wisconsin than in nearly any other state in the country. Okay. So, if there's no bias or racism in the justice system, so then you shouldn't be afraid of this class. Because, you could just go to that class and find out that everything's hunky-dory, right? No, she doesn't want the class, not because there's no racism or bias in Wisconsin. It's because she doesn't want to know about it. She's like, la 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 la, I can't hear you. That is not how you should live your life. I mean, nobody is pointing at Rebecca Bradley and saying, you are queen racist, you are the reason everything sucks. Nobody's saying that. People are saying that racism exists in the system. Bias exists in the system. Just because you do not want to see it, and let's face it, she's white. So, would it affect her? No, probably only in the positive. So, of course, she's not going to see it. It just drives me nuts when people ask those who aren't being that racism isn't being directed towards them if racism exists. Of course, you're not going to see it. I mean, well, those who actually give a shit about people would probably see it because they actually possess empathy. But for the most part, you're not going to see it. I'm not going to be affected by racism. Why? Because I'm white. So, I mean, I could be affected by sexism. I could be affected by anti asexuality sentiment. And if you don't think that doesn't happen, I've heard plenty of horror stories where it does. Not to mention, I've had people, um, invalidate the fact that I exist, or just at best be called ridiculous. So, just because you do not see something, you're not affected by something, doesn't mean doesn't exist. It's like that Minnesota congressman, I think it was, the state house, who declared that hunger doesn't exist because he doesn't know anyone who goes hungry. Really? Unless it affects you, it doesn't exist? That's just so much wow. Anyway, the state's bar's petition does not request that the DEIA courses be required, yet Bradley's concurrence includes a section in which he argues that the ultimate intent of the bar, before ending with a list of dozens of diversity-related courses that are already available through the bar's continuing education program. Amid her critique of the DEIA programs, Bradley includes a number of attacks on the court's liberal minority, complaining that their dissent to her opinion isn't as long as her writing warrants. Wait, what? And decreeing the coming change of ideological lean on the court, which would likely reach a different conclusion to the same question. Huh? Complaining that their dissent to her opinion isn't as long as her writing warrants. Is she upset that people aren't taking her as seriously as she wants them to? I didn't realize that someone's writing warranted a certain required length of dissent. What? And decreeing the coming change of the ideological lean on the court, which would likely they would reach a different conclusion because their conclusion would resemble reality. Unlike you, who doesn't want your little feelings hurt that racism exists, as if that somehow means you caused it or something, which is what nobody is saying. Proving well that many proponents of the DEIA orthodoxy demonize its critics, the dissenting justices chose not to respond to this concurrence, instead dismissing it with a headline-grabbing caricature as hostile, divisive, and disrespectful political rhetoric. Because it is? This concurrence cites more than a dozen United States Supreme Court decisions, multiple state Supreme Court decisions, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, Clarence Thomas, he does not belong in that group, James Madison, Montesquieu, and at least an additional dozen legal scholars, authors, and professors. So either she took just about everybody except for Clarence Thomas out of context, or she just decided to throw every name she could think of into her concurrence, and just to make it sound like she knows what the hell she's talking about. So, but in general, she's upset that the liberals aren't taking her seriously, which there's a reason for that. And it's not because you give well thought out arguments. Of course, the real reason for the dissenters' refusal to engage with the substance of an opinion spanning more than 30 pages is the imminent change in court membership, she continues. Really? The new majority will reverse this court's order at its first opportunity. well, we didn't need that invitation, but thank you. Okay. You really think people aren't taking you seriously because the court's leanings are going to be changing in a few weeks? No, they're not taking you seriously because your opinion isn't serious. So, they're fixed it for you. In a dissent joined by the other two liberal justices, Justice Rebecca Dallett simply wrote that the court should have held a hearing on the merits of adding the course. The DEIA training is vital for attorneys to gain knowledge of individual and cultural differences and turn this knowledge into usable skills for serving a diverse community, thereby improving the quality of legal services, Dallett wrote. In short, the arguable merit of this rule petition is obvious. Now, again, Rebecca is screaming, and that is the end of the article, but Rebecca Bradley is screaming that people won't take her seriously, but she only talks about the race. To her, diversity just means race. This isn't just about race. And okay, there might be some courses that the state bar has that address race, but this isn't just about race. It's about sexual orientation, gender identity, religion. I'm sure I'm missing a whole bunch, but it's not just about race. And the fact that she keeps zeroing in, no matter how many times she's told that this isn't just about race, tells you that that's all she cares about. The reason she only cares about race is because she's a racist, and that's all she wants to care about. She just doesn't want people to know that black people, or actually any minority, would be getting short shrift. She doesn't want to hear that because she's racist and she wants to happily continue having the system work against minorities and for white people. She so wants that she's ignoring the whole point of diversity, which is sexism, racism, um, anti-LGBTQ rhetoric. It's so biased. It's so much. Like I said, gender identity, race, religion, sexual orientation, sex. There is so much bias against certain groups of people that this course would be an overarching course for everything, not just race. And the fact that she's just hammering home the race thing screams that she does not know what she's talking about. She just hears that when she hears diversity, she hears white people bad. And she hears that because she wants to keep minorities down. And because she wants to keep minorities down, she doesn't want to hear that the system is doing just that. And because that's the only part that she cares about, she probably doesn't even think about all the others, because not that she isn't anti-LGBTQ+, but she certainly probably doesn't see herself as anti-woman because she is one. So she just concentrates on the thing that is most ingrained in her, which is racism. It's just maddening that they didn't even discuss this. I really wonder how many of those conservatives would have actually, if they heard what the merits of this course was, I wonder how many of those conservatives would have changed their minds. Because not every conservative on the Wisconsin Supreme Court is a dullard like her. Some people do know how to think critically. So, yeah, it would have been really nice to have seen that, but alas, we will never know. But once the new court is seated, and if this case is revisited, I'm really curious about the conservative justices, how many of them are going to side with the liberal majority, because then they will hear the merits. And like I said, at least one, if not two of them, are not mindless ideologues. They actually do look at the merits of cases, and they don't just automatically side with conservatives. So I wonder if they had actually allowed themselves to hear the case, if they would realize, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought. Who knows? Anyway, I'm rambling. So with that, I will see you guys in the next video.